Radhe Radhe, happy Lori, happy Makar Sankranti, Pongal, and other festivals weekend, and of course also the weekend of Jagat Gauratam Devas. We had our Bhagavad Gita study class today, so Mummy and I are here to record this recap video and present to you a summary of the content we covered. Here we are, Mummy.
Radhe Radhe.
Bringing up the screen, you'll see that we covered in class chapter 8, verses 4, 5, and 6. But that was after we had a recap quiz to review the material from last time, chapter 8, verses 1, 2, and 3. So we highly encourage you all to take a look at the description or the community portal page, get the slides, get the material, and revisit that material when you can. So chapter 8, verse 4, we start off with that one.
Adhibhutam ksharo bhavaha purushascha-adhidaivatam adhiyajnyo hamevatra dehe deha bhritam vara.
So chapter 8, verse 4, the catchphrase here is A plus answers, because as we saw last time in chapter 8, verses 1 and 2, Arjun had asked A plus questions, coming from A for Arjun, but also focusing on terminology, many words beginning with A or and of course, excellent top-notch questions, so A plus questions, which now beget from Sri Krishna A plus answers. In chapter 8, verse 4, Sri Krishna introduces his responses to 3 of Arjun's terms, being Adhibhuta, Adhidaiva, and Adhiyagnya. Very briefly, we saw that all that physical manifestation that is constantly changing, that is known as Adhibhuta. We saw that Sri Krishna, of course, as the Supreme Lord, presides over all the celestial gods, administering their various functions. And so Sri Krishna is the Adhidaiva. And finally, the very important concept that Mummy also stressed at length, Adhiyagnya. Whatever we do in terms of sacrifices, offerings, not just rituals, could be austerities, could be any kind of service, seva, all that is considered as the umbrella term sacrifice. And who presides over all those sacrifices? That, defined here by Sri Krishna, is he himself, Adhiyagnya, the Lord of all sacrifices. So as Swamiji told us in the commentary, it would be wonderful for all sacrifices we perform to be done for the pleasure and satisfaction of the Lord. Next up, we have chapter 8, verse 5.
Antakale cha mameva smaran muktava kalevaram yah prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra sanshayah.
So chapter 8, verse 5, R&R, remember and relinquish. So this catchphrase here is hopefully easy to remember. And in fact, it has the word remember in it because Sri Krishna says that those who remember him at the time of giving up the body, at the time of relinquishing the body when there is death, they will certainly come to him. He says there is no doubt about this. Short paragraph of commentary because it's also connected to the next verse, chapter 8, verse 6. But here again, very clearly in Sri Krishna's words, he talks about us. If we are able to remember him at the time of death, then we shall attain God. We shall come to his abode. As Swamiji mentioned in the commentary, that is a combination of 2 major aspects, one's state of consciousness, as well as the object of one's absorption. So whether it is a, Lori prayer or song, such as the one Mummy sang or described in class, or anything else, such as God's transcendental names, forms, virtues, pastimes, or abodes, if we can focus our mind and our absorption on that at the time of death, then Sri Krishna says there is no doubt we shall reach his abode. Finally, we see chapter 8, verse 6.
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajtyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha.
Finally, chapter 8, verse 6. Oh dear is the catchphrase, not a spelling mistake as we mentioned, but in fact the story we saw and also connected to the flyer. This Lori, what's your homophone of choice? Dear, the beautiful one shown here, D-E-E-R, or perhaps dear to us, like God, D-E-A-R. Your choice, our choice, individual journeys. But chapter 8, verse 6, oh dear, talks about in the commentary the story of sage or King Bharat and how he was so attached to a deer he had found, gave up his spirituality. The story comes from the Vishnu Purana, I believe, and he was then, given rebirth as a deer. But because it was a Jati Smara birth where he could remember some of his past lifetime events, he was, of course, very spiritually connected. So he hung around near ashrams and eventually was born again as a human, as a Brahman, who then proceeded further on his spiritual journey and eventually attained God state. Chapter 8, verse 6 tells us from Sri Krishna that whatever one remembers upon giving up the body at the time of death, whatever we are contemplating, whatever we are focusing on, that is the state that we attain. Hence, this very poignant story of King Bharat and his attraction to that deer. So that's why both these verses, chapter 8, verse 5, and chapter 8, verse 6, go hand in hand. In the first one, we see that we attain God if we remember him at the time of death. In contrast, if we remember something or someone else at the time of death, then that's a different state that we shall attain. So again, the important element Swamiji says is to develop that God consciousness inner nature. And that's done, as Mummy reminded us, through constant practice, constant thoughts on the divine various aspects of God. I'll hand it over to Mummy now to teach us any important Sanskrit words before we wrap up.
So from verse number 4, look at the word aksharaha, that means perishable. From verse number 5, madbhavam. Madbhavam means God-like nature. That is what Krishna is teaching us to develop. We need to develop a God-like nature. How do we do that? By constant contemplating on Nam, Roop, Gun, Leela, Dham. Names, forms, virtues, pastimes, and abodes of God. We need to practice that day in, day out. We have to make it a nature, a habit. That is how only at the time of Prayan Kale, at the time of death, Antakale, we'll be able to, after practice of many lifetimes, such practices, contemplation on God's names, forms, Leela, Gun, Dham, will be able to remember God's name at the time of death. And then only we'll be able to reach Krishna. So this is the crux of these 3 verses. From verse number 6, the important word is Bhava Bhavitaha. Bhava Bhavitaha means absorbed in contemplation. That is what Krishna is teaching us. So we learned Adhibhuta, Adhidaiva, Adhiyagnya, Adhiyatma, Paramatma, Virat Purush. These are the words that we learned in these 3 verses. And these are in answer to Arjun's questions. And Krishna is telling us that we have to learn to contemplate on God's names all the time. Make it as a habit so that Prayan Kale, Ant Kale, we are able to remember God. So, wishing you all happy Lodi, and 2 lines for that. Vishama Sanu Lodi de, Zyada de pave थोड़ी दे लोड़ी असा तेरे कोलो लैनी थानू श्यामा जी देनी पैनी आशामा सानू लोड़ी दे. So हे श्यामा, give us your bhakti, अपने चरणों की भक्ति. Give us the bhakti of your lotus feet. That is all we are asking for Lodi. Happy Lodi to all of you.
On that very devotional, sweet, and divine sentiment, indeed, happy Lori, happy festivities this weekend. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next week, same time, 20th January, Saturday, 2024. Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe.